Welcome back. In the previous lesson, I finished building the header of our page, which is this one right here. Now I gotta take care of the sidebar and the footer. First of all, the sidebar. In order to work with sidebars, you have to register them first, and you do that inside functions.php. So let's write function number 7, which will register the widget areas. And that's how the sidebars are called. So the first thing I gotta do is check if the function I want to write already exists. So if not function exists, and the name will be alpha widget init. So if the function doesn't exist, we're gonna create it, function alpha widget init, and we're gonna trigger this function by using a hook, add action widgets init. So this is where all the sidebars are being initialized. We're gonna also fire our alpha widget init function. Now inside, we're gonna do this. If function exists, register sidebar. So with this, we're basically asking if the current version of WordPress supports sidebars. And if it does, we're gonna call that function, register sidebar, and it receives an array of elements. So array, and we start with this. Name is going to be the main title of my sidebar. So I'm going to make this a translatable string. I'm going to say main widget area. Next will be an ID. And I'm going to give this an ID of sidebar 1. Next will be a description. And the description will also be translatable. Something like this. And then we have 4 parameters which deal specifically with the widget. So the first one is before widget, and in here we can input the content that will appear before each widget. So in my case, it's going to be a div with an ID of $1$s, and this will be filled in by WordPress as it generates the widgets. And then I can add a class of widget, for example, followed by this little bit, which will also be replaced by WordPress with the class for that specific widget. Okay, so this is before the widget. Next, we're gonna have an after widget property. And in here, I'm just gonna close the div and I'm gonna say end widget with an HTML comment there. The third and the fourth properties deal with the widget title. So I'm going to say before title, I'm going to have an h5 with the class of widget title, and after title, I'm going to just close the h5. Okay, and that's it basically. That's how you register a sidebar. Now, we have 2 sidebars here. We have one main sidebar which will be present right here on the right side, and one that will be present in the footer. So we got to call this function again. Register sidebar, simply copy and paste, and change a couple of things. It's going to be the footer widget area with the ID of sidebar 2 appears on the footer. Class widget, I'm going to add the class of call sm3, so we're going to have 4 columns for the widgets in the footer. Okay, let's see, end widget title. So let's save this. Let's go back in our appearance here, and you can see the widget section appeared. Click on it, and you can see main widget area and footer widget area, the 2 sidebars we just created. So now you can simply drag and drop widgets into those sidebars. Now, to display them in our page, we gotta create the sidebar.php function. So, going back here, sidebar.php file, excuse me, not function, so sidebar PHP, some PHP tags, and a small description. Okay, and here I'm going to start with a PHP. I'm going to say if is active sidebar. I'm going to pass in sidebar1, which is the ID of my sidebar right here. So if this is registered, then I'm going to do an aside. Class is going to be sidebar, and also call md4. And this will complement the call md8 that you see right here. So call md4, also role, we're going to say complementary. And inside, I'm going to say PHP dynamic sidebar, sidebar1, and then end if. Okay, so what we're doing here, if we have an active sidebar, then we're going to print out some HTML, and then inside we're going to load the actual sidebar. So let's see, in the main widget area we have archives and a custom menu. Let's refresh our page and scroll all the way down. Yeah, and notice the archives, and we should have a menu. Let's see. This is the menu, save, refresh, and there it is. So this is the widget title, and this is the actual widget. Okay, cool. So that is the sidebar. Now let's take care of the footer real quick. You can see we have a notice here. So the footer, really simple. Create a file called footer.php. And in here, I'm going to start by closing this container and this row right here. So div and row, and this one is for the container. Okay, so now we have closed the HTML that was starting on the very top. Okay, on top of that, I'm going to do the footer. So footer with a class of site footer, which will contain the following: a container, so we can properly center all of the content. And then we have a sidebar, so I'm going to say PHP get sidebar, and we can actually pass in an argument here. So we're going to say footer. Now this will load sidebar dash footer. And then let's add some copyright information. So div class copyright. We're going to do a paragraph. Let's do the date. And let's only do the year. So I'm going to put a capital Y there. And then I'm going to put an anchor tag with the blog name. So href will be echo home URL. And the text will be PHP blog info name. Okay, let's refresh, see what we got so far. So copyright 2014 WordPress 3.9, good. And then you can also add, let's put a translatable string here, like all rights reserved and alpha. Okay, so that's the basic copyright. Let's see it. Okay, cool. Now, after the footer, I'm going to say this, PHP WP footer. This is another hook, just like we used in header PHP. Yeah, we used WP head. Well, this is WP footer, and this will load various scripts into the footer if necessary, and other WordPress related things. Okay, and after this, I'm gonna close the body, which was started in header.php and HTML. Refresh. So now on the footer, if we go back to widgets and we add, let's say meta into the footer, and we're going to call it meta, notice it doesn't show up because we haven't created the sidebar footer.php. So sidebar footer.php, I'm actually going to copy the contents from sidebar PHP because it's very similar. So sidebar footer here, the footer sidebar. If is active sidebar, sidebar 2. I'm going to have on a side class footer sidebar. This grid class is no longer necessary. And since each widget in the footer will be on a separate column, I'm also going to include a div class row here. Okay, and then dynamic sidebar, sidebar 2. Save, refresh, and there it is. There is the meta widget. You can add another one like a search widget maybe, or even a text widget. Okay, save these, refresh, and there it is. Meta, search, and test. And that's it for the footer. And in fact, for index.php, we now have a fully functional index.php file. So let's take a look at the roadmap. Index, header, footer, these are complete, content is complete. The next thing we gotta do is page.php, which is a template for a single page, right? So if we go right now to, let's say, Lorem Ipsum, it still uses the index.php template, but we're gonna write a separate one. So I'll see you in the next lesson.